I had always thought I knew her. After all, we'd been together for 10 years. But then, slowly, things started to change. I could feel it, like a cold wind creeping through the cracks of our once warm home. It started with the little things, her distant glances when I spoke, the way her phone became glued to her hand, her sudden insistence on working late nights, and the increase in her time spent away from me. I used to be her everything. Now, it seemed like I was slowly fading into the background. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, everyone goes through phases. But then, there was the night she came home late, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. I tried to brush it off. She was tired. She'd had a rough day at work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't want to believe it. My mind couldn't even begin to process the possibility that my wife, my best friend, the one person I trusted above all else, could be hiding something from me. But as the weeks passed, the signs became harder to ignore. The long hours at work, the cryptic messages on her phone that she quickly hid from me whenever I walked by, the way she suddenly started dressing up for casual evenings out with her friends. I had never seen her this distant. I started asking myself questions I had never asked before. Was she seeing someone else? Was I the one who was blind to the signs? It all came to a head one night when I returned home early. Her car was parked in the driveway, but she wasn't inside. I checked her usual spots, but the house was eerily quiet. And then, I found it. Her phone, left on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me do it. I hadn't touched her phone in years, respecting her privacy. But that night something drove me to look. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just the need to know the truth. And there it was. A message that would change everything. It wasn't from her friends. It was from him. I didn't recognize the name at first, but something about the message made my heart race. A plan for the weekend, a meeting, a promise to keep things secret. The words were playful, flirtatious. Too familiar for just a coworker. I froze. The cold, hard truth hit me like a brick wall. But I still didn't have the full picture. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And what did I do now? I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I knew more. But what I didn't realize was that I was standing at the edge of a much deeper rabbit hole than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not yet. I needed more than a single message to piece this all together. That text on her phone confirmed my fears, but there were too many gaps in the story. Who was this guy? How long had it been going on? I couldn't just let it in with a gut feeling. I had to know everything, every detail, before I took the next step. The days blurred into each other as I quietly observed. I kept a distance, pretending everything was normal, while I searched. I rifled through her emails, checked her social media activity, and scrolled through our shared accounts. At first, it seemed like just everyday stuff, work, family memes. But then, I came across something odd in her phone's calendar app. A date marked simply as John. It seemed harmless at first, but then I wondered, who was John? The more I dug, the more I found. It wasn't just one instance. There were meetings, strange late-night calls, and an obvious pattern of secretive behavior. It all pointed to one conclusion. My wife was involved with someone else. But still, the details eluded me. I needed proof, more than just text messages or calendars. The real turning point came a few days later when she came home late, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But something was different. There was a nervous energy in her, an anxiousness I hadn't seen before. She seemed too eager to talk, asking questions about my day, about my mood. I didn't answer. I simply watched. Later that night, when she was asleep, I couldn't resist. I checked her phone again. This time, it was clear. The texts were even more revealing than I expected. I'll make sure my husband's out of the house tomorrow. Can't wait to see you. That was it. The undeniable proof. She was cheating. And with someone I knew. Not just anyone, but a lawyer. A man who was no stranger to me. Someone I'd considered respectable in our circle. How had this happened? How had I missed all the signs? The betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about how deep the deception ran. But instead of confronting her immediately, a voice inside me urged caution. I needed to gather more information, plan my next move carefully. The lawyer, this man I thought I knew, had to have a deeper role in all this, and I needed to uncover it. For now, I stayed silent, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was already plotting my next step, and it was going to be anything but calm. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The pieces were all there, scattered across her phone, her calendar, and the odd behavior I couldn't explain. But now I had to figure out how far this went. Who was this lawyer? And why had he become so entangled in my wife's life? My mind raced as I thought about everything we had built together. The years, the trust, the life that now felt like a lie. I kept my distance, just enough to watch her every move without raising suspicion. I stayed calm, but inside, I was a storm. I wanted answers, but I wasn't going to get them from her, not yet. I needed to understand the full extent of their connection. How much time had they spent together? What had they shared? What did she see in him? I decided to go deeper. I took the name John and started digging. I searched online, looking for any connection between him and her. It wasn't much at first, just a few mentions of him in her work emails and some mutual acquaintances we shared. But then I found something. An old photo. It was one I had never seen before, a snapshot from a work event. She was smiling, holding a drink, standing far too close to this man for comfort. His arm was around her waist, and their faces were so close that it didn't look like a casual friendship. The connection was undeniable. This was more than just a fling. But still, there was something about this guy that didn't add up. I dug further, finding that he was more than just a lawyer. He had a reputation I hadn't heard before. He was known for playing dirty in court, using underhanded tactics to win cases, and had a long list of shady clients. He was the type of man who would do anything to get what he wanted. And it suddenly hit me. He wasn't just in this for the affair. There was something more sinister at play here. It was a slow burn of realization that I couldn't ignore. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was dealing with someone who was clearly hiding more from me than I could have imagined. The affair was the surface, but underneath, there was something darker, something that I needed to figure out before I confronted her. I felt my anger building again, but this time it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the lies, about everything she had kept hidden from me. But I couldn't act on impulse. I had to plan. I had to be methodical, calculating. The more I learned about him, the more my stomach churned. This was no simple affair. John wasn't just a lawyer. He was a man of influence, a man who used his power to manipulate situations to his advantage. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This was bigger than just betrayal. I wasn't sure what I had gotten myself into, but I was beginning to realize that confronting her might not be as simple as I had hoped. I spent the next few days obsessively researching everything I could find about John. He wasn't just a lawyer. He had ties to some shady business dealings, and there were whispers I found buried deep in online forums and anonymous blog posts, that he had used his profession to cover up some less-than-legal activities. It was all circumstantial, but I knew better than to ignore it. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous this whole situation seemed. It wasn't just about my wife and John anymore. It was about what John represented. He wasn't just a cheater in my life. He was a threat. He had the connections, the resources, and the arrogance of someone who thought they could get away with anything. I couldn't just confront my wife and walk away from this. No, I needed to understand the full scope of their relationship, and most importantly, how deep John's involvement really went. I was already deep in a web of lies, but I needed more. The information I had gathered so far felt like the tip of an iceberg. I had to find out everything. Was my wife just another conquest for him, or was this something more calculated? And how far would he go to cover his tracks? I took a few calculated risks. One evening, I followed her when she left the house. I kept my distance, driving just far enough behind her to not be noticed. She took the same route every time, straight to a quiet part of town. It wasn't far from where we lived, but it was secluded. I watched as she entered a small, discreet office building, the kind of place where you wouldn't expect a lot of foot traffic. I wasn't sure what she was doing there, but something about it felt off. It didn't take long before a familiar black car pulled up. My heart skipped a beat when I saw John step out. I didn't need to see more. It was enough to confirm everything. They had been meeting here, alone, away from prying eyes. This wasn't a fling. This was planned, calculated, and ongoing. But I still didn't know the full story. I didn't know what they had been doing in that office, or what kind of grip he had on her. The anger inside me grew, but I still kept my calm. I had to outsmart them both. I wasn't going to let this destroy me without a fight. What I had stumbled upon wasn't just an affair. It was a strategic move, a well-thought-out plan that went beyond my marriage and into something far darker. I had been so focused on the personal betrayal, the lies between my wife and this lawyer, that I hadn't stopped to consider what else they might be involved in. But now, the pieces were starting to fit together in a way I couldn't ignore. After that night, I couldn't shake the image of John stepping out of the black car and entering that office. I had to know what they were up to. So, I did what I thought was the only option left. I followed them. I waited a few days, making sure everything looked normal at home. It didn't take long before the next opportunity came. She left the house in the same manner as before, driving to the same secluded office. This time, I was prepared. I followed her, parked a few streets away, and waited. I had no plan other than to see what was happening when they thought no one was watching. Hours passed. I began to question if I was making a mistake. What if this was just another one of her late-night meetings? What if I was overreacting? But then, something shifted. The door to the office opened. A man emerged, not John this time, but someone else. He was older, dressed in a way that made him look important. His presence didn't seem like it belonged to a law office. I waited, keeping my distance, until the man left. He drove off, and I saw my wife walk out soon after, looking hurried, almost anxious. She glanced around as if she was worried someone might be watching. That's when I knew. This wasn't just an affair. This was a part of something much larger. I didn't follow the man that night. I couldn't risk getting caught, but I knew enough to understand that there was something deeply wrong here. She wasn't just meeting with John. She was involved in something much bigger, something that had layers I had yet to uncover. The worst part was realizing that I wasn't just dealing with a lawyer. I was dealing with someone who had connections. Powerful connections. People who could easily ruin lives if they wanted to. I wasn't just facing a broken marriage anymore. I was in the middle of something dangerous, something that could take everything I had if I wasn't careful. I went home that night, my head spinning with the new information. The anger was still there, but now it was mingled with fear. I was no longer just protecting my marriage. I was protecting my life. I couldn't shake the image of that man leaving the office. My wife, John, everything had become so tangled. This was no longer just about a cheating wife. Something much darker was at play, and I was starting to realize how deep I had fallen into this twisted web. I couldn't just sit around pretending everything was fine. The need for answers gnawed at me. Every corner of my life felt like it had been turned upside down. The more I tried to piece it together, the more I understood that John wasn't just an affair partner. He was a key player in something much bigger. But what? I started digging into the office building they had been meeting at. It wasn't just some random place. It was linked to various shady entities, ones that dealt in high-level finance, corporate maneuvering, and even rumors of laundering money. But nothing was concrete, just whispers and half-truths. It was like the more I searched, the more layers of secrecy I uncovered, but none of it felt close enough to the truth. Then came the email. I had always suspected there was more hidden in her inbox than I had already seen. This time, I found it, a message from John. It wasn't a casual note or a flirtatious text. It was cold, legal, full of jargon. But buried within the business talk, there was a phrase that stood out like a red flag. The deal is in motion. We need to act fast before others notice. What deal? I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. It wasn't just about an affair. This was something far more calculated, something that reached beyond our marriage. The email mentioned arrangements and protecting assets, but it wasn't clear what that meant. The pieces didn't quite fit yet, but it was evident. I was standing on the edge of a much larger game, one that didn't just involve my wife. I didn't know what the deal was, but I had the distinct feeling it wasn't anything good. Everything felt like it was leading me into something dangerous, and I wasn't sure how far it went. For now, I had to keep my silence. Confronting her without the full picture would be foolish. I needed to keep playing my cards close, gather more details, and figure out just how deep this went. Because one thing was clear, my life, my marriage, everything, was tangled in a dangerous web. I was no longer just dealing with a cheating wife. I was caught in a web of deception that stretched far beyond what I had ever imagined. The more I uncovered, the more it became clear that John wasn't just an affair partner. He was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. My mind couldn't stop racing, piecing together the fragments of information, trying to connect dots that didn't seem to line up. The email from John had shaken me more than I cared to admit. The deal is in motion, he'd written. We need to act fast before others notice. But what was this deal? What was my wife involved in? And what did John mean by protecting assets? I had no answers, only more questions. I couldn't risk confronting her yet, not without knowing exactly what she was wrapped up in. The lies were too deep, the stakes too high. I had to keep playing this game, keep my distance while I gathered more information. But it was hard. Every time she walked through the door, my blood would boil. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying to me about something far bigger than I could comprehend. I decided to take a more direct approach. If I couldn't trust her to reveal the truth, I would have to find it myself. I started to track her every move, paying closer attention to her behavior. It didn't take long before I noticed another pattern. She was getting more and more paranoid. She'd glance at her phone every few minutes, like she was waiting for something. She'd become more defensive when I asked about her day. But the real break came one evening. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV, when I noticed her phone buzzing on the coffee table. It was a message from John, and the preview was enough to stop my heart. "We need to meet. It's getting dangerous. Don't talk to him." The urgency in his words sent a chill through me. What was so dangerous? And who was him? Was I the one they were worried about? Had my wife started to fear me, or was there something else they were hiding? I knew at that moment that the clock was ticking. Whatever this deal was, it was escalating, and I had to get to the bottom of it before it was too late. The lies, the betrayal, the secrets, they were all part of something much darker, and I was about to uncover a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for. I couldn't keep living like this. The constant watching, the paranoia creeping in with every glance, every phone buzz, it was tearing me apart. I was standing on the edge of something I didn't fully understand, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to uncover everything. The stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. My marriage wasn't the only thing on the line now. My entire life felt like it was unraveling. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't hesitate. I reached over, picking it up before she had the chance to react. My heart pounded as I unlocked it, hands trembling. The message from John was clear and chilling. "We need to meet. It's getting dangerous. Don't talk to him. We have to keep him in the dark." I felt the blood drain from my face. Him. It wasn't just a casual comment. It was a warning. A warning about me. My mind raced. What did they mean by dangerous? Why was I suddenly the target of this cryptic message? Were they worried about me finding out too much? Had my wife been keeping me in the dark all this time, afraid of what I might discover? I felt the walls closing in, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her know that I had seen the message. I had to keep my composure and continue to dig deeper. The truth was out there, but it was hidden behind layers of lies, manipulation, and something far darker than just infidelity. The next few days were a blur of tension. My wife acted more distant than ever. She was constantly on edge, and I could feel her guilt pressing against me like a heavy weight. But I had to pretend I didn't notice. I had to keep playing the game. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it together. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting ready to slip away. Her nervous behavior, her phone constantly glued to her side, the way she'd look over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't paying attention, it all screamed something was about to happen. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, it happened. She left the house without warning, her car disappearing down the street before I could even think to react. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, started the car, and followed her. This time, there was no turning back. I had to find out where she was going, and who was waiting for her on the other side. I tailed her through the city, the suspense thick in the air. We reached an isolated part of town, and I saw her car pull into a parking garage. My heart raced. This wasn't like any of the other places she'd been to. This was a different kind of meeting, a secret, hidden from the world. I parked at a distance, my hands gripping the wheel. She wasn't alone. I watched as John, the lawyer, stepped out of the shadows to meet her. I watched from a distance, my heart thundering in my chest as my wife and John stood in the dimly lit parking garage. They weren't just talking, they were conspiring. I couldn't hear the words, but the way they leaned in close to each other, exchanging glances that were far too intimate, left no room for doubt. This wasn't just an affair. This was a partnership of some sort, something calculated, something dark. I sat frozen in my car, the engine off, the world outside spinning while my focus remained locked on them. The more I watched, the more it became clear. They weren't just involved in a casual fling or an emotional betrayal. They were wrapped up in something much more dangerous. Their body language said it all. John wasn't just another man she had been cheating with. He was her co-conspirator. Whatever game they were playing, they were in it together, and they had been for a long time. I waited in silence as they spoke. John handed her something. An envelope, thick with papers, probably contracts or financial documents, from the way she handled it. She tucked it quickly into her bag, looking around nervously before they parted ways. John disappeared into the shadows of the parking garage, and my wife drove off without a second glance. I felt my pulse racing, and suddenly everything that had been nagging at me, the phone messages, the secrecy, the coldness, clicked into place. This wasn't just about infidelity. She wasn't just betraying me with him. They were involved in something much bigger, something that had been carefully orchestrated. They weren't just breaking hearts, they were breaking laws. I couldn't process everything all at once, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about saving myself. The web of lies they had spun around me was deeper than I could have ever imagined, and I was tangled right in the middle of it. I drove home, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. There was no denying it now. I was in over my head. But I wasn't backing down. I would uncover the truth, no matter how far I had to go. Whatever the deal was, whatever dark business they were involved in, I wasn't going to let it destroy me without a fight. I had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain. The game had changed. I had seen enough. Everything was starting to click into place. Yet, the deeper I delved, the more questions I had. That meeting between my wife and John, the lawyer, was just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more beneath the surface, and I was determined to uncover it all, no matter the cost. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. The usual routine felt like a farce. Every time I glanced at my wife, I felt a mix of anger and dread. She was a stranger now, an actress playing a role in a story I wasn't supposed to know. Her little smiles, her casual conversations, none of it mattered anymore. The woman I thought I knew had been hiding a different side, a side that had been planning something without me even realizing it. I couldn't keep living in this haze. I had to know what was going on. I decided to follow her again, but this time, I wasn't just observing. I was getting closer to the truth. As much as I dreaded it, I knew that I couldn't back out now. The web was too tangled, and I was caught in the middle. I waited until she left for another meeting, as she had been doing lately. This time, I wasn't just trailing her. I was on a mission. I kept a safe distance, watching her drive to a different part of the city. This wasn't where she usually went. I had no idea what to expect, but the fact that she was acting more secretive than usual made my heart pound with fear. She pulled into an industrial district, nothing but warehouses, broken streetlights, and shadowed alleys. It didn't feel like a place for meetings or business, and it sure didn't feel like a place I should be following her to. But I parked a block away and waited, watching her get out of the car, the same nervous energy from the night before still radiating off of her. She entered one of the warehouses, no signs, no identifying logos. Just a cold, steel building in the middle of nowhere. I sat in my car, unable to move. My gut was screaming at me, but I stayed frozen. I needed to know what was happening inside. Time seemed to crawl. Every minute felt like an hour. I was close, closer than I had ever been. But I also felt the walls closing in, a sense of urgency rising within me. I couldn't keep playing this game forever. Eventually, I was going to have to confront her, confront John, and face whatever it was they had been hiding. I was on the edge, but I still didn't have all the answers. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the deeper I went, the harder it would be to get out. This wasn't just a simple affair anymore. This was something much bigger, and I was standing at the center of it all. I had been parked there for what felt like forever, my hands gripping the wheel as I watched the warehouse. The waiting was excruciating, every minute heavier than the last. My mind was a storm, swirling with the questions that had been building since I first realized something was off. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. I had to know what was really going on. After a while, she came out, holding a thick folder that caught the streetlight. It looked official, too serious to be anything insignificant. She scanned the area, checking for anyone who might be watching, before slipping into her car and driving off. My gut twisted. I followed her, careful to stay far enough back not to raise suspicion. She was too far ahead of me, too aware of the world around her to let anything slip. But this time, I wasn't just following her for answers. I was trying to piece together the fractured reality of my life. The more I watched, the more I realized the danger wasn't just in the affair. It was what she was involved in, the people she was involved with. When she parked the car and stepped inside our house, I felt it, the point of no return. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The secrets had piled up, and I was standing at the edge, waiting for the truth to come crashing down. I walked into the house, trying to breathe through the storm of emotions swirling inside me. She was in the kitchen, as if nothing had happened. She looked at me with a half-smile, but I could see through it. The distance between us was widening with each passing second. "Where were you today?" My voice was calm, but the anger simmering beneath the surface made my hands shake. She turned, her smile faltering. "Just some work stuff. You know how it is." I knew better. I had seen enough, heard enough. "I know exactly how it is," I said, keeping my voice steady, but firm. "But I don't think you're telling me everything." Her eyes widened just a little, and for the first time in ages, I saw the cracks in her perfect facade. "I know about John," I added, "and the warehouse. The deal. All of it." She froze, her eyes flicking to the floor, then to my face. For a moment, it seemed like she was going to deny it, but she didn't. Instead, she said the one thing I wasn't ready for: "I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. It was, for us. For our future." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to believe her, to think that this was some misguided attempt to secure our lives. But it wasn't just about our future. It was about something much darker. Control. Power. And in the end, I was just another pawn in their twisted game. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped. I didn't expect anyone. I opened the door, and there he was, John. I stood frozen, staring at John as he stood in my doorway. This wasn't a visit I'd expected. The man who had been secretly entwined with my wife now stood at the threshold, a smug, calculating look on his face. My heart slammed against my chest, but I didn't step aside. This was no casual visitor. This was someone who had been a part of a lie so deep that I wasn't sure how far it went. Behind me, I could feel my wife's presence, her body stiff, as though she knew everything was about to collapse. She didn't say a word. She just watched, silently waiting for what would come next. John didn't waste a second. "We need to talk," he said, his tone eerily calm, as though the world hadn't just crumbled in front of me. He wasn't here for an explanation. He was here to control the narrative. I blocked the door, not letting him in. "Talk? About what?" I managed to say, my voice a little rougher than I wanted, but I couldn't hide the fire building inside me. He had no idea what he was walking into. "About your wife. About the situation we've found ourselves in," John replied smoothly. "There's a lot you don't understand yet, but it's not too late for you to get on board." The words hit me like a slap. "Get on board," I repeated, feeling the anger boil. "You've been deceiving me, using my wife as a pawn, and I'm done with it." John glanced at me, completely unfazed, and brushed past me as if it were his right to do so. My blood ran cold. He had no respect for me, no fear. He sat on the couch as if it were his home, and my wife followed suit, sitting next to him without a word. "I'm not here to explain myself," John continued, his voice cool, detached. "I'm here to make sure you understand your place in all of this. You're not the one in control anymore. It's bigger than you, bigger than your marriage. You've been an obstacle, and now it's time to finish what we started." The finality of his words hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just an affair, it was something far more sinister. My wife wasn't just an unfaithful partner. She was a willing participant in whatever dark deal John was orchestrating. I couldn't take it anymore. My fists clenched at my sides, my patience wearing thin. "Get out," I spat, my voice thick with rage. "I don't want to hear another word from you." John didn't flinch. He slowly rose to his feet, his gaze never leaving mine. "You'll hear from me again," he said with a cold finality, as if it were inevitable. He turned toward my wife, giving a brief nod before walking out. I stood there, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The world I knew had shifted, and I was no longer in control of my own life. The truth was darker and more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed in the empty house. I stood there, motionless, my mind racing to catch up with the reality crashing down around me. John and my wife, partners in something I hadn't even begun to understand. The cold, calculated nature of the situation was overwhelming. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about something much darker, more dangerous. I took a step back, trying to steady my breath. Everything I thought I knew about my life was unraveling. The trust one had placed in her, in the life we had built together, it was all gone, shattered by lies and manipulation. And the worst part? I didn't know who to trust anymore. I turned to my wife, who hadn't said a word since John left. Her face was pale, her eyes darting to the floor, avoiding my gaze. The silence between us was suffocating. The anger and betrayal I felt were like a weight in my chest, but I couldn't bring myself to scream, to lash out. I had already seen enough. The truth was right in front of me, and I had no idea how to process it. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant for it to get this far. I could barely contain the rage bubbling inside me. How far exactly? I snapped. How far did it have to go before you told me the truth? Her eyes welled up with tears. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make it stop without losing everything. Everything. I couldn't even process her words. The reality was sinking in. She wasn't just trying to save our marriage. She was saving herself, whatever that meant in this twisted game she had been playing. You've been hiding something from me for months, maybe longer, and you expect me to believe this was about us? I shook my head in disbelief. You've been planning something with him. From the beginning. You've been in on this whole thing. She flinched at the accusation, but didn't deny it. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said again, her voice shaking. John, he's not who you think he is. I cut her off. I don't want to hear about John. I want to know what's been happening, what you have been a part of. She hesitated, struggling to find the words, but before she could speak, the doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door without thinking, and there stood someone I never expected, someone I never thought I'd see again. It was the same man from the warehouse. The older figure who had left right before my wife did. He wasn't here for pleasantries. He was here for something else. I stood there, staring at the man in front of me, trying to make sense of everything. The man from the warehouse, the one my wife had met with just hours before, was standing in my doorway, an air of quiet authority surrounding him. The familiarity of his face sent a wave of unease through me, but I couldn't figure out why he was here. His presence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me with more questions I didn't have answers to. Can I help you? I asked, my voice steady but strained. I had no idea what he wanted, but I had a sinking feeling this wasn't a social visit. He looked past me into the house, his eyes briefly resting on my wife before locking onto mine. I'm here to talk, he said, his voice calm but forceful. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a casual conversation. He wasn't here to apologize or clear anything up. He was here to lay out the next move. I stood frozen, unwilling to let him in. About what? I managed, my heart pounding. I already knew I wasn't going to like whatever was coming. This isn't about your marriage, not anymore, he said, his gaze unflinching. It's about something bigger. Something you're now a part of whether you like it or not. My wife had moved to the edge of the room, but she didn't say a word. I glanced at her, searching her face for any sign of what was going on, but she avoided my gaze. She hadn't spoken much since John left, but the few words she had uttered haunted me. I never meant for it to get this far. The idea that she was involved in something much larger than an affair, a tangled mess of deception I couldn't even begin to understand, felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Who are you? I demanded, more forcefully than I intended. What's going on? What have you and John been dragging my wife into? The man's lips curled into a tight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Let's just say things have gone too far for anyone to turn back now. His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. It wasn't the kind of answer I was expecting, but it was the answer I feared. I was in over my head, and there was no way out. He didn't give me a chance to speak before stepping forward. I instinctively blocked the door, not letting him in. I'm not letting you into my house, I said, my voice laced with defiance. Whatever this is, it ends now. You're not welcome here. The man stepped back, but his eyes never wavered. This isn't over. It's just beginning. You've already been swept into something bigger than your personal problems. You'll see soon enough. He turned to leave, and I slammed the door shut behind him, my mind reeling. I was stuck, tangled in a web of secrets I wasn't even close to untangling. But one thing was certain now. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for my very survival, and whatever John and this man had planned, I wasn't sure I was prepared for the fallout. I stood there in the silence after the door slammed shut, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My hands were shaking, my mind a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and rage. The man's words echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger than just an affair was unfolding right under my nose. I looked at my wife. She hadn't moved since the man left. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stared at the floor. She looked like a stranger, and I couldn't fathom how we had gotten here, how she had gotten there, in the arms of a man like John, in a scheme I still didn't fully understand. I took a deep breath, my voice cold and calm despite the storm inside me. "Tell me everything," I demanded. "Now." She flinched, tears welling in her eyes, but she didn't speak. I wasn't sure if she was afraid, or if she just didn't know where to begin. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, she whispered, "I never wanted it to go this far, but I couldn't stop once it had started." I felt a flicker of hope, that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally open up. But what came next crushed that hope into dust. "This wasn't just about us," she continued, her voice shaky. "John and his associates, they had a plan. They've been pulling strings for a long time. I got involved without realizing how deep it all went. It started with something small, a financial deal, and then it spiraled out of control. I felt sick to my stomach. A financial deal? That's how it all started? It wasn't about love, or passion, or even a fleeting affair. It was about money, power, manipulation. And I had been too blind to see it. "The man you saw earlier," she added, her voice barely audible, "he's connected to a much larger operation." I didn't know who they were at first, but now I do. They're dangerous. And once they had me, they started pulling you into it too. You've been a pawn in their game. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The betrayal wasn't just about her and John. It was about me, my life, my very identity. I had been manipulated, used, without even realizing it. "But why?" I asked, my voice breaking as I struggled to hold back the fury. "Why didn't you tell me? Why drag me into this?" She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I was afraid. If I told you, they would have come after you too. I couldn't let that happen. I thought I could fix it. But it's too late." It hit me then. She wasn't just apologizing. She was trapped. Trapped in a world of lies, greed, and deception that she couldn't escape. And now, so was I? I stood there, numb, trying to process everything. The game was bigger than I thought. But I wasn't just going to sit back and let it destroy me. I couldn't. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned. There was no happy resolution, no simple confrontation that would make everything right. The truth was out, but the battle was far from over. I had been dragged into something far darker than I could have imagined. And now, it was time to make a choice. Do I walk away, leaving everything behind and trying to rebuild the pieces of my life? Or do I face whatever storm was coming, take the fight to them, and try to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me? I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going down without a fight.